What is going on, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Forward Thinking Founders. I am very grateful to have your attention, at least for the next 15 minutes of this episode. Forward Thinking Founders is a podcast where I interview pre-seed and seed stage founders about their products, what they want to build into the world, and why. We dive into how they spend their time, what's their vision, what's their origin stories, all these things, so you can learn all about what's coming tomorrow. Because these companies haven't hit critical scale yet. Most of them haven't hit product market fit. These are just early stage companies, and the big question is, what can this be? And in this podcast, we bring that out. So with that, I really hope you enjoy your time listening to today's episode. And I've already done 200 plus, so if you like this one, listen to some of the other ones, like with Imadi Kund, Austin Allred, Leah Culver. We have great interviews, so check it out, enjoy the repository, and for now, let's get into today's episode. Here we go. All right, how's it going, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Forward Thinking Founders, where we talk to founders about their companies, their visions for the future, and how the two collide. Today, I'm very excited to be talking to Paul Gross, who's a co-founder of Remora. Welcome to the show. How's it going?
It's going well. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to learning more about what you're working on. For people that haven't heard of your company, they haven't heard of Remora, what is that? What are you working on?
We built a device that captures the carbon emissions from a semi-truck. So our device mounts on the back of the truck, right between the tractor and the trailer on a big 18-wheeler, and it attaches to the truck's tailpipes, and then it captures at least 80% of its carbon emissions. And the driver offloads the carbon dioxide while they refuel, and then we sell that carbon dioxide to concrete producers or greenhouses or other end users. And we're able to share that revenue with the owner of the fleet. So we can help big fleets reduce their emissions, meet their climate commitments, and earn this new stream of revenue.
Wow, this is incredible. Usually I ask, like, how does it work? Explain the UX to me, but you kind of just did it. I honestly just want to dive right into how did you get this idea? Or in other words, like, what's the origin story for Remora? This sounds pretty much industry shifting, world changing, at least from my perspective, but how'd you come up with it?
Well, Christina, my co-founder, pioneered the field of mobile carbon capture during her PhD. So the EPA essentially asked her, is this possible? And she spent years bench testing, vehicle testing, and then actually testing in the EPA's National Vehicle and Fuel Emissions Lab to figure out that, yes, it is possible. And she figured out how we can do it. And from there, we started the company. So I actually came across Christina's dissertation online while I was doing a whole bunch of research on carbon capture as I was finishing up college. And I called her up, wrote her a business plan. We talked a bunch, and I finally convinced her to quit her job at the EPA and come start the company with me.
Okay, so let's break down a little bit of the different things that can be done with Remora. So let's say, sure, for example's sake, I am a semi-truck driver. And let's say you were trying to, well, let's start there. You just met me for the first time. I just met you. You want to sell me and get me in this system. Can you kind of walk me through how do you communicate what you do to semi, or semi companies, et cetera? And I guess what do they get when they sign up for Remora? Could you go a little bit more into detail, kind of the user experience a little bit of one of the drivers?
Sure. So the way it works is we bolt this device onto the back of their truck, and all they have to do is offload the carbon dioxide every 600 to 800 miles. So we're actually starting by working with some of the largest fleets in the country. We've signed up 9 Fortune 500 companies, 2 of the Fortune 10. We've signed up 7 of the top 30 trucking companies in the country. So we're kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum from those owner operators who own their own semi-truck. But the core concept's the same, which is they are doing round trips from a distribution center, and they offload their carbon dioxide at the end of the day. All it takes is you drive up to the offload tank, attach a hose, the device pumps the carbon dioxide out into the offload tank, and you detach the hose and you're done. So it's like reverse refueling, and it only takes 5 minutes. So it doesn't add much time to their day.
So as you and your co-founder are working on this, I would love to hear, how do you split your time? This is an industry that it's obviously very important for the world. I'm curious, what type of work goes into time spending on Remora? What do you spend your time on? What does she spend her time on? And kind of, we'd love to hear the split there.
Sure. So It's the two of us, Christina and me, and then it's Eric, my third co-founder, who actually was a diesel semi-truck mechanic for almost a decade. And then he went back and got his bachelor's and master's in mechanical engineering from the University of Michigan. And then he actually built hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric semi-trucks for some of the world's largest automotive companies. So he is sort of an equal part of the company along with Christina and me. And the way the three of us divide it is I talk to investors and customers, and Christina works on the science. So, the adsorbent that we're using to capture the carbon dioxide. And then Eric works on the mechanical engineering, designing the device, figuring out how it mounts on the back of the truck and all of that. We're now about 15 people. So, Eric, Christina, and I all have teams that are fantastic that are working on those sections of the business. But having those clear lanes has been enormously helpful for us.
And if you can kind of give me and give the audience a little education on the wider scope of your industry. Obviously, the world has a problem, right? And what you're doing is you're solving this in your way. But can you kind of like just do a high level education on like why should Remora exist and like what you're doing compared to like other options? Like, can you just kind of give people a 101 on like why carbon capture, carbon removal matters, and and how Remora plays in the larger role of like solving this problem that we have as a world, if you're open to like kind of tackling that?
Of course. So, I think the climate crisis is the challenge of our generation. We're already seeing some pretty bad effects, the flooding, the droughts, the wildfires. There's smoke in the air in New York from the wildfires in California. I grew up in San Francisco. Last year, the sky was dark orange for a day because of climate change. So, I think, that's the broad context as to why I decided to tackle this. And the reason that carbon capture matters is that, we have a lot of engines that emit carbon dioxide, and we're not going to immediately be able to transition all of them to electric or hydrogen. And, I think especially for long haul trucks, it's going to be really, really hard, if not impossible, to go to electric trucks or hydrogen because the batteries add so much weight to the truck that the driver ends up losing out on about 25% of their payload capacity. And that's an issue that this industry is facing as they make these really aggressive climate commitments saying we need to reduce our emissions by half by 2030 or by 2025. They don't have the time to wait, and their customers, their investors, the regulators are demanding that they take action, and they need something that works with their existing fleet right now. And that's where our device comes in. This is ready to go. It's cheap. It retrofits onto their existing trucks, so they don't have to replace their entire fleet. And they can use it right now to dramatically reduce their carbon emissions and meet those climate commitments.
So walk me through, 5, 10, 15 years from now, what is the big vision for Remora? Or I guess in other words, what's the world going to look like when you kind of do what you're trying to do, and what direction are you rowing in every day?
Well, if we got our device on every semi truck in the US, that's 2 million trucks, we would basically take care of 5% of all US emissions. So that's about 340 million metric tons of carbon dioxide captured every year. And that is just in the US alone. There are semi trucks all over the world. Trucking is an $800 billion market. So this is just a huge problem. There are a lot of carbon emissions here. And there's a huge potential for us to be a massive carbon capture company tackling it. So that's our goal. We want to do this for semi trucks. We also want to do it for some of the other forms of long haul heavy duty transport that are going to be really hard to electrify. So locomotives and cargo ships are two examples. Maersk, which is one of the largest cargo shipping companies, they pledged to reduce their emissions to nothing by 2040, and they're going to need help with that. And we'd love to get involved. So those are the areas that we want to be helpful, and those are the areas we think mobile carbon capture can be the right solution. And then, I think the really cool part is we can do a lot of exciting things with the carbon dioxide, including turning it back into fuel. And really, that's the end goal. Is if we can offload the carbon dioxide at a truck stop, turn it back into fuel, and put it back into the truck. That's a circular solution that I think will be really helpful for the trucking industry and help us reduce worldwide emissions.
And in order to make that happen, you'll need some help, right? It takes a village to make a startup work and make the vision happen. So my
Yeah.
question for you is, how can the Forward Thinking Founders community help? Are you hiring? Are you raising money? Are you looking for customers, partnerships? How can we assist?
Well, thank you for offering, first of all. And yes, we can use all the help we can get. I think a few things to think about. One is, we did just raise a $5.5 million seed round from some fantastic investors. We did Y Combinator. We brought in Union Square Ventures in first round, and Lower Carbon Capital, which is Chris Sacca's fund. But we will be raising in the future. So if folks are interested from that perspective, feel free to reach out. We'd love to start the conversation. And I think the biggest thing we could use help with is growing the team. If you want to get involved, we're always looking for new folks, especially mechanical engineers and chemical engineers, people with background in carbon capture, or people who are just excited about tackling the climate crisis. So you can go to our website, you can sign up for updates at remoracarbon.com/updates. And that way you'll be the first to know when we open up these new roles and grow the team.
And then for my last question, if someone is excited about this, as excited as I am, or even more, how can they find you on the internet? Like, do you have a website or social media presence or an email address or kind of something else? How can someone kind of learn more on the internet?
Yeah, so if you go to remoracarbon.com, that's our website. On Twitter, we're at remoracarbon. And that's REMORA carbon. And that's the best way to follow us. And then if you want to email us, you could just shoot an email to hello@remoracarbon.com.
And then I usually end it here, but I actually have to ask one more question because I'm curious. What is Remora? How did you come up with that name? I just love to hear the story behind the name before we close it out.
A remora is a suckerfish that clings onto sharks and cleans them. So we like to think of that as kind of like a metaphor for our device, which clings onto semi-trucks and cleans them.
That is amazing. I'm very happy to end the interview on that. Thank you so much for coming on to the podcast. I think you're doing obviously world-changing work, and I look forward to seeing your success. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.